The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber opened with a soft hiss. Admiral Lisa Carter walked through them with her back straight and her head held high. Behind her came Captain Amy Rodriguez, her boots clicking on the smooth crystal floor. The chamber was huge and filled with beings from across the galaxy. Some looked almost human, while others were so strange that Lisa had to work hard not to stare. The Zephyrian ambassador, Lyralay, sat on a floating throne made of pure light. Her skin was silver and seemed to glow from within. Her hair moved like it was underwater, even though there was no breeze. She was beautiful in a way that made humans feel small and plain. Next to her sat Warlord Vexara of the Thrakari Empire. Her red scales caught the light, and her yellow eyes watched everything, with the focus of a hunter. She was twice the size of any human, and her claws could probably cut through steel. Lisa stepped forward to the center of the chamber. Around her, hundreds of alien beings watched from their seats. Some whispered to each other in languages that sounded like music or wind or grinding metal. Others just stared with eyes that had too many colors or no colors at all. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," Lisa began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "I am Admiral Lisa Carter of Earth. I come before you today to request membership in the Galactic Council for Humanity." A sound like tinkling bells filled the air. It took Lisa a moment to realize that Lyralay was laughing. The sound was beautiful, but somehow made Lisa feel cold inside. "Oh, how charming," Lyralay said, her voice like silver music. "The little humans want to join the big boys and girls." She turned to look at the other council members. "Did you see their ship when it arrived? That rusty metal box they call a warship?" More laughter rippled through the chamber. Lisa felt her jaw tighten but kept her face calm. Amy stepped closer to her, ready to support her admiral no matter what happened. Empress Zarathene of the Celestial Dynasty rose from her seat. She was tall and thin with blue skin that sparkled like stars. When she moved, it looked like she was dancing even though she was just walking. "We have examined the human vessel," she said, her words flowing like water. "It is made of simple metal and powered by chemical reactions." "How quaint." "Chemical reactions," repeated a being that looked like a walking crystal. "How do they even move through space with such primitive technology?" Warlord Vexara stood up, her massive form casting a shadow over half the chamber. "Their weapons are equally amusing," she growled, her voice like rocks grinding together. "They throw chunks of metal at their enemies. No energy shields, no plasma, cannons, no quantum disruptors. Just metal and explosives." Lisa stepped forward again. "Our ship may look simple to you, but it has brought us across the stars to stand before you today. We have overcome every challenge our home system could throw at us. We have learned to work together as one people despite our differences. We ask only for the chance to prove ourselves worthy of standing among you." The chamber fell silent for a moment. Then the laughter started again, louder this time. It came from everywhere at once, a sound that made Lisa feel like she was drowning. "Prove yourselves?" Lyralay asked, still laughing. "My dear little human, your ship would not survive 5 minutes against the weakest pirate vessel in our space. Our crystal ships bend light itself to our will. We can become invisible or blind our enemies with pure radiance. The Thrakari fleet could destroy your entire world with a single dreadnought," Vexara added, showing teeth that looked sharp enough to cut diamonds. "Our plasma cannons burn hotter than your star. Our shields can stop anything you could possibly throw at us." A new voice spoke from the shadows at the back of the chamber. "Perhaps the humans should return to their little blue world and play with sticks and stones some more." The speaker was hidden, but the voice was cold and empty like space itself. More beings joined in the mockery. They pointed at images of the USS Defiance that appeared in the air above the chamber. The human ship looked rough and patched compared to the sleek alien vessels shown next to it. The Zephyrian ships were like beautiful dreams made real, all curves and flowing lines that seemed to glow from within. The Thrakari warships were massive and powerful, covered in armor that looked like it could stop anything. "Look at their communications array," someone called out. "It uses radio waves. Radio waves. My personal transport has better equipment than their flagship. And those weapon ports," another voice added, "they actually fire solid projectiles. What do they think this is, the Stone Age?" Amy felt her hands curl into fists. She had spent years of her life helping to build the USS Defiance. She had worked alongside the best engineers Earth had ever produced. She had watched them solve problems that should have been impossible to solve. The ship might not look pretty, but it was strong, and it was theirs. Lisa raised her hand, and the chamber slowly grew quiet again. "We understand that our technology may seem basic to you," she said, "but we did not come here to impress you with fancy ships or powerful weapons. We came here because we believe that every species has something to offer. We may not have crystal ships or plasma cannons, but we have something else. We have the will to never give up, no matter how hard things get." Lorelei tilted her head, like she was listening to a child tell a cute story. "How sweet," she said. "The humans think willpower can stop energy beams and quantum torpedoes." The formal vote was quick and brutal. Every single member of the Galactic Council voted against Earth's membership. The rejection was unanimous and absolute. As the votes were counted, Lisa felt something cold settle in her chest. Not anger, not fear, but determination. "The Council has spoken," announced the Chamber's AI voice. "Earth's application for membership is denied. Reason given: technological inadequacy and strategic irrelevance." Two sleek escort ships appeared outside the Chamber's windows. They were there to make sure the humans left Council space immediately. Lisa looked around the chamber, one more time, meeting the eyes of every being she could see. "Thank you for your time," she said simply. "We will remember this day." As Lisa and Amy walked back toward the chamber doors, Lorelei called out one last time. "Do come back when you have learned to build proper starships, little humans. Perhaps in a few hundred years you will be ready to play with the adults." The massive doors closed behind them with a soft click that somehow sounded final. Lisa and Amy walked back to their shuttle in silence, but both of them were thinking the same thing. The galaxy had just made a very big mistake. 3 months had passed since the Galactic Council sent Earth packing like unwanted children. Admiral Lisa Carter stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, watching the stars through the main screen. The ship floated at the edge of known space, far from the gleaming worlds of the Council members. Earth had been forgotten, pushed to the outer rim where nobody important lived. Then the first reports started coming in. They were scattered at first, hard to believe. Entire star systems going dark, ships vanishing without a trace, colonies that had been thriving for centuries suddenly sending out desperate calls for help before falling silent forever. Commander Kate Sullivan had been promoted after Earth's rejection. She now commanded a small task force of human ships that patrolled the outer territories. Most of the time they dealt with pirates and smugglers, nothing too serious. But the reports coming through their communications array were different. These were not pirates or raiders. This was something else entirely. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Beth Morgan from her station. "We're getting another emergency transmission from the inner systems. It's from the Zephyrian fleet near the Kepler Nebula." Lisa moved to look over Beth's shoulder. The transmission was broken and full of static, but the words that came through were clear enough. "Mayday, Mayday! This is Crystal Wing Squadron. We are under attack by unknown hostiles. Our weapons are having no effect. Repeat, our weapons are having no effect. They're adapting to everything we throw at them." The transmission cut off suddenly. Beth tried to re-establish contact but found only empty space where the Zephyrian fleet had been. Kate looked at the readings coming through, their long-range sensors, where 12 beautiful crystal ships had been flying just hours before. There was now only debris and something else, something that their sensors could not quite identify. "What do you think it is?" Amy Rodriguez asked. She had been promoted to captain after their return from the council chambers, but she still served as Lisa's second in command. "I don't know," Lisa admitted. "But whatever it is, it just destroyed a full Zephyrian squadron in minutes." More reports flooded in over the next few days. The Thrakari Empire had lost 3 battle groups to the same unknown enemy. Their massive red warships, famous throughout the galaxy for their unstoppable power, had been torn apart like paper toys. Warlord Vexara herself had been forced to retreat after watching her flagship get consumed by what witnesses described as a living shadow. Enemy had a name now. The survivors called it the Void Swarm. It moved through space like a dark cloud, eating everything in its path. Ships, stations, planets, even stars seemed to dim when it passed nearby. But the strangest part was how it fought. Every weapon used against it worked exactly once. The second time someone fired the same type of weapon, the swarm simply absorbed the energy and turned it back on the attackers. Lieutenant Colonel Beth Morgan had been leading reconnaissance missions along the swarm's path of destruction. Her reports painted a picture that made even experienced soldiers feel cold inside. The swarm was not just destroying things, it was learning from them. Every ship it consumed made it smarter. Every weapon it faced made it stronger. The Zephyrians tried their light-bending technology, Beth reported during a briefing on the USS Defiance. The swarm adapted within hours. Now it can bend light too, but better than they ever could. The Thrakari plasma cannons lasted exactly one battle. The second time they fired, the swarm shot the same plasma back at them, but twice as hot. Commander Kate Sullivan studied the tactical displays showing the swarm's advance. It was moving toward the core systems now, getting closer to the most important worlds in the galaxy. The council members who had laughed at Earth's primitive technology were finding out that their advanced weapons meant nothing against an enemy that learned faster than they could adapt. "What about their quantum weapons?" Amy asked. "The Celestial Dynasty was always bragging about how their quantum disruptors could tear apart anything. Used them last week," Beth replied grimly. "The swarm figured them out in 6 hours. Now it's using quantum manipulation better than the Celestials ever did. Same story with the Nexari matter manipulators and the Corvin dimensional gates. Everything they throw at this thing just makes it stronger." The situation was getting desperate. The greatest civilizations in the galaxy were falling back, world by world, system by system. Their beautiful ships and advanced technology were worse than useless against an enemy that turned their own weapons against them. Pride was becoming fear, and fear was becoming panic. Then Ambassador Lyralay sent a message to Earth. It came through on a secure channel, encoded with Zephyrian encryption that should have been impossible for humans to decode. But human engineers had spent months studying alien technology, and they had figured out more than their former hosts realized. The message was short and to the point, but Lisa could hear the fear in Lyralay's musical voice. "Admiral Carter," the ambassador said, looking tired and scared in a way that made her seem less like a goddess and more like a person. "We may have made an error in our assessment of the current situation. The threat we face requires unconventional approaches. We formally request Earth's assistance in dealing with the Void Swarm." Lisa played the message 3 times before she fully believed what she was hearing. The same beings who had mocked humanity's primitive technology were now begging for help. The weapons they had bragged about were useless. The shields they had been so proud of were failing. The tactics they had perfected over thousands of years meant nothing. "They're scared," Amy observed. "Really scared." "They should be," Kate added, looking at the latest intelligence reports. "The swarm is learning everything they know and using it against them. Their own advanced technology is being turned into weapons pointed at their hearts." Lisa sat in her command chair and thought about the situation. Earth had been dismissed as primitive and irrelevant. Their ships had been called rust buckets. Their weapons had been laughed at as barbaric toys. But now those same advanced civilizations were facing an enemy that could adapt to anything they tried. Anything they tried. But the swarm had never faced humans before. It had never encountered chemical explosives or kinetic weapons or the kind of jury-rigged solutions that human engineers love to create. It had learned to counter energy weapons and exotic matter and quantum manipulation, but it had never seen a simple piece of metal flying really fast. "Send a reply to Ambassador Lyralay," Lisa ordered. "Tell her we'll help, but we do this our way, with our ships and our weapons and our tactics." "Should we ask for an apology first?" Amy suggested with a slight smile. Lisa thought about it for a moment, then shook her head. "No. We'll let our actions speak for themselves. Besides, I have a feeling they're going to be apologizing to us soon enough." As the USS Defiance changed course toward the war zone, every human on board felt the same thing. They were heading into a battle that had already destroyed the most powerful fleets in the galaxy. The enemy they faced could adapt to any weapon and counter any tactic. By all logic, they should have been terrified. Instead, they were excited. Finally, someone was going to learn what humans were really capable of when they stopped trying to impress people and started trying to win. Admiral Lisa Carter looked at the message from the Galactic Council one more time before deleting it. The great powers of the galaxy were begging for help from the same humans they had mocked just months ago. Their advanced fleets were scattered. Their perfect weapons were useless. Their mighty empires were crumbling before an enemy that learned faster than they could think. Lisa turned to Captain Amy Rodriguez, who was studying tactical displays of the Void Swarm's latest advances. The enemy had consumed 17 more systems in the past week. Each victory made it stronger and smarter. Each conquered world added to its knowledge and power. "Amy, send out the order," Lisa said quietly. "Protocol Barbaric is now in effect." Amy smiled for the first time in days. Protocol Barbaric was something they had developed during the long journey back from the council chambers. It was born from anger and frustration, but it had grown into something more. It was their answer to a galaxy that thought primitive meant weak. The USS Defiance and her sister ships began moving toward the Tau Ceti system, where the swarm's advance forces were tearing apart the last Zephyrian defensive line. But these were not the same ships that had been escorted out of council space. Engineer Commander Melissa Torres had been busy during their exile. "Torpedo tubes loaded with kinetic penetrators," reported Weapons Officer Jennifer Lane from her station. "Depleted uranium cores, shaped charges, and good old-fashioned high explosives. Railgun batteries charged and ready," added Gunnery Sergeant Patricia Hayes. "We've got solid tungsten rounds that'll punch through anything." The swarm had learned to counter energy weapons by absorbing and redirecting them. It had figured out exotic matter by analyzing its quantum structure. It had mastered plasma by studying how it behaved at the molecular level. But it had never encountered a chunk of very hard metal moving at a significant fraction of light speed. "Commander, Torres had spent months retrofitting the human fleet with weapons that should not have worked. She combined Zephyrian crystal fragments with human explosives, creating warheads that the aliens said were impossible. She used Thrakari plasma conduits to superheat kinetic rounds, making bullets that were part projectile and part miniature. Star. The beauty of it," Torres explained to anyone who would listen, "is that our weapons are too stupid for the swarm to understand. It's been fighting advanced civilizations for who knows how long. It expects energy beams and quantum torpedoes and dimensional rifts. It doesn't expect us to just throw rocks at it really hard." Colonel Beth Morgan's Marines had been equally busy preparing for what everyone knew would be close combat. The swarm consumed ships and absorbed their crew, but it had to get close to do it. That meant boarding actions and hand-to-hand fighting in cramped corridors where advanced tactics meant nothing. "Flamethrowers, chainsaws, and thermite charges," Beth reported during the final briefing. "If it can adapt to our technology, let's see how it handles technology from 300 years ago." The first engagement came near a dead Zephyrian colony world. The swarm's scouts moved through space like living shadows, dark shapes that seemed to eat the light around them. They had grown fat on crystal ship technology and could bend radiation to hide themselves from most sensors. But human sensors were different. They were crude and simple and looked for basic things like mass and heat and electromagnetic signatures. The swarm's stealth technology was designed to fool sophisticated detection systems, not the electronic equivalent of a caveman looking for footprints. "Contact," announced sensor operator Susan Wells. "3 swarm scouts bearing 27 Mark IV. They're trying to stay hidden, but they're lit up like Christmas trees on our displays." "All ships," Lisa broadcast on the fleet frequency, "remember the plan. Hit them hard, hit them fast, and hit them with stuff they've never seen before." The USS Defiance fired first. Instead of the energy beams the swarm expected, tungsten slugs accelerated to incredible speeds, slammed into the alien scouts. The projectiles punched through their adaptive armor like it was made of paper. The swarm's defensive systems, programmed to counter sophisticated weapons, had no idea how to stop simple kinetic energy. Captain Jennifer Lane, commanding the USS Retribution, followed up with a spread of chemical explosive warheads. The swarm tried to absorb the incoming energy like it had done with plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes. Instead, it got several tons of old-fashioned TNT exploding in its face. The scouts died in seconds, torn apart by weapons they could not understand or counter. Their death screams echoed across subspace in frequencies that made human ears ring, but also carried something else: confusion. For the first time in its ancient existence, the Void Swarm had encountered something it could not immediately adapt to: "Target destroyed," reported Captain Lane with satisfaction. They didn't even know what hit them. But the real test came when the main swarm force arrived. It emerged from hyperspace like a storm cloud made of darkness and hunger. It had consumed dozens of advanced fleets and learned from each encounter. It should have been unstoppable. Commander Torres watched her instruments as the swarm deployed its stolen technologies. Zephyrian light bending, Thrakari plasma manipulation, celestial quantum effects. It was a greatest hits collection of galactic warfare, all turned toward destroying the primitive human fleet. "Here they come," announced Amy Rodriguez. "All ships, execute Pattern Chaos." Pattern Chaos was not a real tactical formation. It was barely controlled insanity disguised as strategy. Human ships, scattered in directions that made no mathematical sense, fired at targets that logic said they should ignore, and used their engines in ways that should have been impossible. The swarm, programmed to analyze and counter logical tactics, found itself facing an enemy that seemed to have no plan at all. Human captains rammed disabled ships into swarm clusters, detonated nuclear mines in impossible formations, and used gravity wells as slingshots to launch kinetic projectiles from unexpected angles. "This is madness," transmitted Lyrelay from her damaged crystal ship, which was hiding behind a human escort. "How can they fight with no coordination, no strategy, no plan?" "Ma'am," replied Captain Rodriguez, "we've got a plan. The plan is to make sure the enemy never figures out what we're going to do next." Engineer Commander Torres had prepared the fleet's secret weapon. While the swarm was busy trying to understand human tactics, she launched a spread of what her reports called miscellaneous ordnance. In reality, they were torpedo tubes full of scrap metal, broken machinery, and literal garbage accelerated to combat speeds. The swarm's point defense systems, designed to stop sophisticated missiles and energy beams, ignored the incoming debris as harmless. By the time they realized their mistake, chunks of human junk were tearing through their hulls and causing systems failures that made no sense. Major Susan Wells led the first boarding party when a damaged swarm vessel drifted to, close to the USS Defiance. Her Marines stormed aboard with weapons that belonged in a museum, flamethrowers designed for clearing vegetation, chainsaws meant for cutting wood, sledgehammers that were just heavy pieces of metal on sticks. The swarm's nanite defenders, evolved to counter energy weapons and sophisticated technology, found themselves helpless against simple combustion and mechanical cutting tools. They could absorb a plasma beam and redirect a quantum torpedo, but they had no defense against fire that came from burning hydrocarbons. "Boarding party to bridge," Wells reported over her radio. "We've taken their engine room. Turns out these things really don't like chainsaws." The tide of battle was turning. For the first time since the swarm had appeared, an enemy fleet was not just surviving, but winning. Human weapons, human tactics, and human stubbornness were proving more effective than all the advanced technology in the galaxy. But the best was yet to come. Captain Amanda Foster, commanding the USS Determination, discovered the swarm's greatest weakness by accident. Her communications officer had been broadcasting human music during the battle, thinking it might confuse enemy sensors. What it actually did was much more devastating. The swarm's collective consciousness, designed to process logical information and tactical data, could not handle the chaotic beauty of human creativity. Jazz music, classical symphonies, and rock songs created feedback loops in its neural networks. Poetry and art, transmitted alongside battle reports, caused system crashes that spread through the enemy fleet like a virus. "Keep broadcasting," Foster ordered her communications team. "Art, music, poetry, whatever you've got, it's driving them crazy." As human ships pressed their attack, broadcasting everything from Shakespeare to heavy metal, the Void Swarm began to retreat for the first time in its existence. Its ancient intelligence, capable of learning any technology and countering any strategy, could not process the beautiful madness of human culture. The galaxy watched in amazement as Earth's barbaric fleet drove back an enemy that had seemed unstoppable. The same beings who had mocked humanity's primitive technology now saw it as their salvation. News of humanity's victory at Tau Ceti spread through the galaxy faster than light itself. For the first time since the Void Swarm had appeared, an enemy fleet had not just survived, but had actually pushed the ancient horror back. The great powers that had once mocked Earth's primitive technology now watched their primitive saviors with something between amazement and desperate hope. Ambassador Liralai sat in the damaged command center of her crystal ship, surrounded by the wreckage of what had once been the pride of the Zephyrian fleet. Through her ship's transparent walls, she could see human vessels moving with purpose and confidence. The USS Defiance and her escorts had saved Liralay's life, and the ambassador was still trying to understand how. Captain Rodriguez, Liralay, called over the communication channel. "I must ask again, how did you know that music would affect them?" Amy Rodriguez appeared on the holographic display, looking tired but pleased. Behind her, human crew members were already working to repair battle damage using methods that would have made alien engineers weep with frustration. They were welding patches over holes, rerouting power through backup systems and jury rigging. Solutions that somehow worked better than the original designs. "We didn't know," Amy admitted. "Captain Foster's communications officer was just trying to boost morale. Turns out the swarm's collective mind can handle tactical data and technological information, but it can't process human creativity. Our art and music create logic errors in their system." "Logic errors," Liralai repeated slowly. "You defeated an ancient intelligence with logic errors." "That's humanity for you," Amy said with a tired smile. "We specialize in making no sense at all." The human approach to warfare was spreading through the surviving galactic fleets. Warlord Vexara, her proud Thrakari nature wounded, but her tactical, mind-sharp, had begun coordinating with human commanders to learn their methods. The results were devastating to the swarm. Colonel Patricia Hayes worked closely with Vexara's warriors to develop hybrid tactics that combined human unpredictability with Thrakari strength. The red-scaled warriors took to human methods with enthusiasm that surprised everyone. They had always respected strength, and watching humans tear apart an unstoppable enemy with chainsaws and thermite charges earned their complete admiration. "Your Marines fight like berserkers," Vexara told Colonel Hayes during a joint planning session. "But berserkers with purpose and intelligence? It is magnificent." Patricia smiled at the compliment. She had spent months training her people for close combat against an enemy that could adapt to any weapon. The solution had been to use weapons so simple that there was nothing to adapt to. Fire burned things, sharp edges cut things, heavy objects broke things. The swarm's advanced intelligence was helpless against principles that had been true since the dawn of time. Captain Amanda Foster had become something of a celebrity among the surviving alien fleets. Her discovery that human culture could crash, swarm systems had opened up entirely new tactical possibilities. Now every human ship broadcast continuous streams of music, poetry, art, and literature while in combat. "We've started including human television shows in our transmissions," Foster reported during a fleet-wide briefing. "Sitcoms work especially well. The swarm's collective consciousness just cannot process the concept of situational comedy." Commander, Melissa Torres had expanded her weapons research to include collaboration with alien engineers who had survived the initial swarm attacks. Working together, they created hybrid technologies that combined the best of both approaches. Human simplicity, merged with alien sophistication, produced weapons that were both effective and impossible for the swarm to understand. "We've modified Zephyrian crystal matrices to channel kinetic energy," Torres explained to a mixed group of human and alien engineers. "The crystals focus the impact of our solid projectiles, making them hit harder while remaining essentially just chunks of metal flying really fast." The swarm tried to adapt to human tactics, but adaptation required understanding, and human methods seemed designed to defy understanding. When the enemy learned to counter flamethrowers, humans switched to ice-based weapons. When it figured out kinetic projectiles, they started using weapons that fired live animals. When it adapted to explosives, they began using sonic weapons that played death metal at volumes that could shatter steel. Major Susan Wells had become the unofficial leader of what the galaxy now called the Barbarian Corps. Her Marines specialized in boarding actions against swarm vessels, using primitive weapons to devastating effect. They had learned that the swarm's nanite defenders could be confused by simple tactics like smoke screens and mirror mazes. "The key," Wells explained to a group of alien warriors who wanted to learn human methods, "is to remember that these things are machines. Very smart machines, but still machines. They process information logically and respond predictably. So we do things that make no logical sense." The galaxy began to see a different side of humanity. The same species that had been dismissed as primitive and irrelevant was now leading a counterattack against an enemy that had seemed unstoppable. Human commanders found themselves in charge of mixed fleets where elegant alien vessels followed, the lead of crude human warships. Captain Jennifer Lane, commanding the USS Retribution, had proven especially skilled at coordinating multi-species battle groups. Her approach was simple but effective. She let each species do what they did best, while ensuring that the overall strategy remained unpredictable enough to confuse the swarm. Zephyrian ships handle reconnaissance and communication, Lane explained to Admiral Carter during a strategy session. Thrakari vessels provide heavy firepower and boarding support. The crystal-based species work as technical specialists. And we humans make sure nobody knows what's going to happen next, including us. The swarm's retreat from Tau Ceti had been just the beginning. System after system, human-led fleets began pushing the ancient enemy back. Each victory was won through methods that made military historians weep and tactical computers crash, but they were victories nonetheless. Engineer Commander Torres developed what she called the Dumbfire Protocol. It was a collection of weapons and tactics so primitive that they did not even register as threats to swarm sensors. Crossbow bolts tipped with thermite, catapults that launched radioactive waste, torpedo tubes that fired literal kitchen sinks. The beauty of the Dumbfire Protocol, Torres told anyone who would listen, is that it's too stupid to be dangerous. The swarm's threat assessment systems dismiss our attacks as harmless until it's too late. But the real breakthrough came when Captain Foster discovered that the swarm had a critical weakness in its collective consciousness. The ancient intelligence could process vast amounts of data, but it could not handle truly random input. Human creativity, with its chaotic beauty and illogical connections, created cascade failures in the enemy's neural networks. "We've weaponized imagination," Foster reported with obvious pride. "We're broadcasting everything from finger paintings made by 5-year-olds to experimental jazz fusion. The swarm's trying to analyze it all, and it's driving their collective mind completely insane." As human fleets pushed deeper into swarm-controlled space, they found something that surprised everyone. The ancient enemy was not just retreating, it was afraid. For the first time in its existence, the Void Swarm had encountered something it could not understand, could not counter, and could not defeat. Ambassador Lyrelay, her crystal ship now flying in formation with human escorts, sent a formal message to the Galactic Council. "I wish to correct our previous assessment," she transmitted. "Earth's application for membership should not have been denied due to technological inadequacy. It should have been approved immediately due to tactical superiority." The message was received throughout the galaxy, where the surviving civilizations were learning a hard lesson about the difference between sophistication and effectiveness. The humans they had dismissed as primitive barbarians were saving them all, one impossibly stupid tactic at a time. Admiral Lisa Carter stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, watching as her fleet prepared for the next phase of their campaign. They were going to take the fight to the swarm's home territory, to the source of the infection that had nearly destroyed galactic civilization. "All ships report ready," Amy Rodriguez announced. "Course laid in for the galactic core." "Take us in," Lisa ordered. "Time to finish this." 6 months after the Galactic Council had dismissed Earth as primitive and irrelevant, Admiral Lisa Carter stood in the rebuilt council chambers once again. But this time, she was not asking for permission to join. This time, the surviving members of the galaxy's greatest civilizations were asking her to lead them. The chamber looked different now. Many of the floating thrones stood empty, their owners lost to the Void Swarm's hunger. Those who remained bore the scars of a war that had taught them hard lessons about the difference between advanced technology and effective strategy. Ambassador Lyrelay sat quietly in her crystal throne, no longer glowing with arrogant confidence. Her silver skin was marked with stress lines that showed how close her people had come to extinction. Warlord Vexara's red scales were dulled and scarred, but her yellow eyes burned with respect as she looked at the human admiral who had saved her empire. "Admiral Carter," Lyrelay began, her musical voice subdued but sincere. "We owe you an apology. We failed to understand that what we called primitive was actually a form of sophistication we could not comprehend." Lisa nodded but said nothing. She had not come for apologies. She had come to finish what the swarm had started. The enemy's main force had retreated to its origin point deep in the galactic core, to an ancient machine world that had been its home for millions of years. As long as that world existed, the threat would remain. The final assault will require everything we have left, Lisa announced to the assembled council. Every ship, every warrior, every resource. But we do this together, as equals, or we don't do it at all. Captain Amy Rodriguez had been promoted to admiral after the victories in the outer systems. She now commanded the largest fleet in galactic history, a mixed force of human vessels and alien survivors working together under human tactical doctrine. It was a sight that would have seemed impossible just months ago. The journey to the galactic core took 3 weeks. Along the way, they encountered the remnants of civilizations that had tried to stop the swarm alone. Entire worlds reduced to lifeless metal, their populations consumed and their knowledge absorbed. It was a sobering reminder of what they were fighting to prevent. Commander Beth Morgan had been promoted to general and now led the combined ground forces of a dozen species. Her barbarian corps had trained alien warriors in human methods, teaching them that sometimes the best weapon was the one your enemy would never expect. Remember, Beth told her mixed force of humans, Thrakari, Zephyrians, and others as they prepared for the final assault. The swarm expects logical tactics and advanced technology, so we give them chaos and simplicity. We hit them with everything they think is too primitive to matter. The machine world appeared on their sensors like a cancer in space. It was massive, larger than most stars, its surface covered with structures that hurt to look at directly. This was where the Void Swarm had been born, where its collective consciousness had first awakened eons ago. Engineer Commander Melissa Torres had spent the journey preparing humanity's ultimate weapon. It was not a bomb or a beam or anything that looked dangerous. It was a transmission array designed to broadcast pure human culture directly into the swarm's central intelligence. We're going to hit their main processor with every song, every poem, every story, every joke, and every work of art that humanity has ever created, Torres explained to the fleet commanders. All at once, at maximum power, their collective mind won't be able to handle that much beautiful chaos. The battle began as soon as they entered the system. The swarm's defenses were everything they had absorbed from the galaxy's greatest civilizations, but refined and perfected beyond anything the original builders had imagined. Energy weapons that could crack planets, shields that bent reality itself, and tactical coordination that approached perfection. Against this, the combined fleet deployed. Weapons that belonged in museums and tactics that would have failed any military academy examination. Human ships led the charge, broadcasting death metal and children's lullabies while firing tungsten slugs and chemical explosives. Captain Jennifer Lane, now commanding a battle group of mixed human and alien vessels, coordinated the assault on the machine world's outer defenses. Her ships moved in patterns that made no mathematical sense, using their engines as weapons and their weapons as engines. All ships, execute the Kindergarten Gambit, Lane ordered over the fleet frequency. The Kindergarten Gambit was one of humanity's newest tactical innovations. It involved doing exactly what military logic said you should never do, based on the principle that if it was stupid enough, the enemy would never see it coming. Ships flew backwards while shooting forwards, used their life support systems as shields, and rammed enemy positions with their cargo bays. The swarm's perfect tactical algorithms tried to analyze and counter the assault, but there was nothing logical to analyze. Human commanders made decisions based on coin flips, lucky numbers, and what they had eaten for breakfast. The ancient intelligence found itself fighting an enemy that seemed to have no strategy at all. Major Susan Wells led the first wave of ground troops onto the machine world's surface. Her barbarian corps stormed across landscapes of living metal, armed with flamethrowers, chainsaws, and what could only be described as really big hammers. The swarm's nanite defenders, evolved to counter sophisticated threats, were helpless against simple tools applied with human enthusiasm. "Ground team to Fleet Command," Wells reported over her radio. "We've reached the primary processing center. These things really don't like hammers." Admiral Amy Rodriguez coordinated the fleet's final push toward the machine world's core. The swarm was throwing everything it had learned against them, weapons and tactics stolen from 100 conquered civilizations. But for every sophisticated counterattack, the humans had a primitive response that worked better than it should have. "They're adapting to our kinetic weapons," reported Captain Amanda Foster from the USS Determination. "Switch to the slingshot. Protocol," Amy ordered. "Rocks and rubber bands." "Ma'am, did you just order us to attack with rocks and rubber bands?" "Big rocks. Strong rubber bands. Do it." The sight of advanced starships firing literal stones from improvised slingshots would have been comedy if it had not been so devastatingly effective. The swarm's point defense systems, designed to stop missiles and energy beams, simply ignored the incoming rocks as harmless. By the time they realized their mistake, chunks of asteroid were punching through their hulls. But the real victory came when Engineer Commander Torres activated her cultural transmission array. Every work of human art, every song, every story, every joke, and every piece of creative expression was broadcast directly into the swarm's collective consciousness at maximum power. The effect was immediate and devastating. The ancient intelligence, capable of processing vast amounts of tactical and technological data, could not handle the beautiful chaos of human creativity. Jazz music created logic loops in its neural networks. Abstract art caused system failures that spread like wildfire. Poetry written by children crashed processing centers that had operated for millions of years. The swarm's death screams echoed across subspace as its collective consciousness simply shut down, unable to process the wonderful madness of human imagination. Across the galaxy, swarm forces stopped moving as their central intelligence died in a cascade of creative overload. General Beth Morgan's ground forces reached the machine world's core just as the central intelligence failed. They found themselves in a chamber the size of a city, filled with processing nodes that flickered and died one by one as human culture burned through the ancient machine's mind like a virus. "This is it," Beth announced over the fleet frequency. "The swarm is finished." In the aftermath, as the combined fleet surveyed the wreckage of humanity's greatest enemy, Ambassador Lyralai sent a formal message to Earth. "We were wrong about everything," she transmitted. "Your supposed primitiveness was actually a sophistication we could not understand. We thought strength came from advanced technology, but you showed us it comes from the courage to be unpredictable." The new Galactic Council convened 1 month later with Admiral Lisa Carter as its Supreme Military Commander and Admiral Amy Rodriguez as Chief of Strategic Operations. The first order of business was the formal adoption of the human doctrine, the principle that sometimes the best solution is the one nobody sees coming. Earth's warships now patrolled the rebuilt galaxy, their steel hulls scarred but unbroken. The USS Defiance had become the flagship of the Galactic Defense Fleet, carrying a new motto welded to its hull in letters that could be seen from orbit: "Through adversity to the stars." The empire that had mocked humanity's first warship had indeed fallen, consumed by an enemy it could not understand or defeat. In its place rose something stronger, a galactic civilization built on the principle that diversity of thought and approach was more valuable than technological perfection. As Admiral Carter stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, watching the stars of the galaxy they had saved, she reflected on the lesson they had all learned. The most dangerous enemy was not the one with the best weapons or the strongest shields. It was the one you underestimated. The galaxy would never make that mistake about humanity again.